an endocrine organ. Within the parenchyma of the pancreas, you have little islands of cells that produce hormones. These are called the islets of Langerhans. Langerhans is spelled with an S at the end, but we don't pronounce it. So islets of Langerhans are those little pockets of hormone-producing cells. This is the endocrine portion of the pancreas. Now, these islets contain alpha cells, beta cells, gamma cells, and delta cells. The two I want you to be familiar with is the alpha and beta. The alpha cells produce glucagon. Whereas the beta cells produce insulin. These hormones are important in regulation of blood glucose. We're going to talk more about insulin when we get to the endocrine system, but what insulin does is it facilitates uptake of glucose by the cells, by the tissues. In fact, the release of insulin by the beta cells is triggered by elevated blood glucose levels. So in the face of hyperglycemia, meaning elevated blood glucose levels, insulin is released and it facilitates the uptake by cells. In fact, it also facilitates the breakdown of glucose for the immediate energy needs of the body. Above and beyond the immediate needs, insulin then facilitates conversion of whatever glucose is left into glycogen for storage. And then finally, once those storage sites are full, remember that glycogen is only formed within skeletal muscle in the liver, then insulin is going to promote the conversion of whatever glucose is left into fat. The idea is that following a meal, our pancreas produces insulin and it shunts that glucose which is entered into the bloodstream into tissues. Glucagon is its antithesis. Glucagon is stimulated, its secretion is stimulated by hypoglycemia, when glucose levels are low. So what glucagon does is it stimulates glycogenolysis, which is the breakdown of glycogen into its glucose building blocks. So that in a setting of hypoglycemia, that glucose derived from glycogen is released into the bloodstream, and it helps to bring glucose levels back up. This is part of homeostasis. Now, glucagon does other things. It promotes gluconeogenesis. What is gluconeogenesis? Formation of glucose from non-glucose molecules. Okay? And that will also contribute to a rise in glucose levels within the blood. So if we go without eating and our glucose levels within the blood begin to fall, then the pancreas begins to secrete glucagon, which is going to raise those levels back up. Because if we don't, then we're going to suffer some injury to the brain. In AP1, we say the neurons within the brain are very sensitive to a lack of glucose or oxygen. And so if our glucose levels are too low, or if the levels remain decreased for too long a period of time, it starts to affect cognitive function. In the beginning, we become lethargic or confused. But if the glucose levels don't come back up, then we're going to become stuporous or maybe obtunded or even comatose. So it's important to get glucose levels back up to supply the cells of the brain. Now, when we talk about the endocrine function of the pancreas, we mean that these hormones are not secreted into the pancreatic duct. Endocrine glands release their products, hormones, directly into the bloodstream, so that insulin and glucagon are not carried by the duct. Instead, the duct is going to carry the secretions from the exocrine portion of the pancreas. Remember, exocrine glands have ducts, and the largest of those ducts is the major pancreatic duct. The glands within the pancreas, the exocrine glands, take the form of grape-like clusters. You remember what we call glands that are shaped like grapes, like this? Acinar glands. And so we have these grape-like clusters that produce products that are ultimately secreted into the pancreatic duct. Now, when you cut a slice of this exocrine portion of the pancreas, each of these acinar units is going to look like a little serous gland like this. Remember, serous glands produce aqueous secretions that contain enzymes. And so these exocrine glands, these acinar units, are going to produce digestive enzymes, which will be carried into the duodenum. Okay? They'll be carried into the duodenum by the pancreatic duct, where they participate in the digestion of nutrients that the person's ingested. Okay? Now, we've talked about what happens to fat. We said that when fat reaches the small intestine, that triggers release of cholecystokinin, and bile will enter to emulsify that fat, and then once it's emulsified, pancreatic lipase will then begin digesting the triglycerides, breaking it down into smaller building blocks, which then get absorbed. And we talked about how chylomicrons are manufactured and then absorbed into the bloodstream. We said they were absorbed via lymphatics, lacteals. Okay. Let's talk about how carbs are handled. Early on, we said that carbohydrate digestion begins within the mouth through the activity of salivary amylase. Salivary amylase is produced by the serous glands within the parotid and the submandibular gland. So within the mouth, those carbohydrates are broken down into polysaccharides, smaller fragments basically. Okay, now, when that salivary amylase reaches the stomach, its activity is terminated. The gastric acid destroys it. Okay, so those polysaccharides then eventually reach the duodenum. Okay? And in the duodenum, they're exposed to pancreatic amylase. Pancreatic amylase is going to continue to break down those covalent bonds between the sugar units of those polysaccharides. So they're going to continue to break down those carbohydrates into progressively smaller subunits. Now, if you break off small enough pieces, if you break off monosaccharides, those monosaccharides undergo absorption. What about disaccharides? Well, along the brush border of the small intestine, particularly the duodenum, you have what are called brush border enzymes. These are enzymes that are produced by the duodenum or other components of the small intestine. Okay? And these enzymes sit along those microvilli. One group of enzymes produced by the brush border these are the brush border cells here. These enzymes are sitting right along here. One group of enzymes are called disaccharidases. Disaccharidases. And of course, disaccharidases are going to act on disaccharides. Disaccharidases will break disaccharides into monosaccharides, which can then be absorbed. So, the three types of disaccharidases present along the brush border, these would be brush border enzymes, are sucrase, maltase, and what's the other one? Lactase. Sucrase, maltase, and lactase. The ASE ending, that suffix indicates that these are enzymes. Okay. The root of the word tells you what substrate these enzymes act on. So for instance, sucrase acts on sucrose. Lactase acts on lactose. Maltase acts on maltose. So sucrase, remember, is going to act on sucrose, which is composed of glucose and fructose. And we'll break it down into those component monosaccharides. How does it do it? Through hydrolysis. It uses water to split the molecule. Maltase is going to act on maltose, which is glucose and glucose, and it's going to break it down into its components, which then get absorbed. And then, of course, lactase, glucose and galactose, breaks them down into individuals, which then get absorbed. I think everybody's here familiar with the term lactose intolerance. Mm-hmm. People who are lactose intolerant have a deficiency of this enzyme along the brush border, produced by the small intestine. So they don't have enough lactase to break down lactose. If you don't break down lactose, then it can't be absorbed. And so that high if you eat or drink some type of dairy product without lactase, then that lactose load continues all the way down the small intestine to the large intestine, where E. coli and other bacteria begin to metabolize it. Okay? Two things happen in the large intestine. Number one, the high lactose load creates osmotic pressure. In other words, the high concentration of lactose molecules draws in water from the walls of the large intestine, which distends those walls. Now, when you distend the walls of the large intestine, it triggers a myogenic reflex, where you have increased peristalsis. So stretching the walls of the colon is going to trigger increased bowel activity, increased movement. Secondly, the bacteria that begin to metabolize the lactose, they release gases as waste products of that metabolism, like CO2 and methane. And so that causes some bloating, abdominal distension. It causes some release of gas, flatulence. So that someone who is lactose intolerant, if they take a meal that's high in lactose, like milk or cheese or ice cream, about 10 or 15 minutes later, they're going to feel very uncomfortable. Okay, because they're going to start to feel bloated or distended. They're going to start to produce gas, have some excretions, and they'll feel like they have to rush to the bathroom. They'll develop diarrhea. Okay, the gaseous releases are not very pleasant smelling, and so they learn that they have to avoid certain foods. Or the alternative is to take Lactaid. Lactaid is simply a manufactured enzyme. It comes in tablets or drops. They can take with that meal. So you have the lactase available to digest the lactose. I'll tell you a funny story about excretions. You may not enjoy this. I had an elderly gentleman one time. And,
Oh God. He's close to
well, because Dr. Ellis is very sensitive to these types of jokes. But this is not a joke, it's a real story, but he still gets offended. So I had this elder guy came to me, and his chief complaint, the reason he was coming to see me, was because of the nurse mark on the chart was silent excretions. Okay? So I sat down with him and I asked him to tell me about these silent excretions. And he said, well, it's getting embarrassing. He said, I was at church the other day listening to the priest talk, and he said that during the sermon he had like 2 or 3 silent excretions, and people were turning around and started to laugh. Okay? And he says, he says, I have my pride, and so he says it was embarrassing. And he talked about a couple of other episodes where he had silent excretions. He said, in fact, I just had my 86th birthday. And he said, I was singing happy birthday to my family members. And right at the end, when he said, happy birthday to you, he said, and then he released the silent excretion, and everyone started laughing. And he said, it's really embarrassing. And he says to me, he says, what do you think we can do about this problem? And I said, well, the first thing we need to do is to send you to an ear doctor, an ENT doctor, to check your hearing. Okay? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, the excretions aren't silent at all. And so it was funny because then, like a week later, I ran into his name was Dr. Spector. I ran into him in the hospital cafeteria, and he said, "Oh, I wanted to thank you for sending me the gentleman with the silent excretions."
Oh no, that was horrible.
It's just part of getting older.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, why is everybody laughing if they're silent?
Yeah.
Right. Oh my God.
Well, I mean, it could still be malodorous.
Right.
Because I was like, how would everybody know? So wait, like I'm lactose intolerant, but what does it mean to be allergic to like milk? Like, how are they different? Because they are.
Yeah, allergic to milk means that you have an immunologic response, that your immune system is hypersensitive, so that when you're exposed to milk, you produce